See, in this world, there's two kinds of people, my friend.
Beatles people and Elvis people.
There's winners and there's losers.
The workers and the hustlers.
Criminals and victims.
Greeks and everybody else who wished they was Greek.
Welcome to The View from Vulcan, a neurodivergent podcast. I'm Carrie Stewart Langle, and today I'm investigating the gender binary.
Are you aware that there's only two kinds of people on the whole planet?
There are two kinds.
Two kinds.
Two kinds. Two kinds.
There are two kinds of men and only two.
There are two kinds of people in the world. Those who think you can divide humanity into opposing binary categories, and those who understand that reality is a bit more complicated.
There's fat people that were born to be fat, and there's fat people that were once thin, but they became fat.
So, which are you? Do you see things in black and white, or shades of gray?
Now, Beatles people can like Elvis, and Elvis people can like Beatles, but nobody likes them both equally.
Are you team binary or team non-binary?
Only two kinds of men wear earrings. Pirates and
Or are you beginning to see the irony?
There are two kinds of people in this world, and you ain't one of them.
On The View from Vulcan, I apply cold hard logic to hot button issues, even if it means bursting a few bubbles on the left, right, or center. Why? The short answer is because I was born that way. Born on the autism spectrum, that is, even though it took me 49 years to figure that out and get an official diagnosis. Yes, I am that guy. The one fidgeting in the back of the conference room, trying not to draw attention to himself, until suddenly piping up with the most awkward question possible about the company's latest strategic initiative. So when, not if, you are offended or outraged by something on the podcast, please don't accuse me of mansplaining or whitesplaining. I prefer the term aspie-splaining.
There's only two kinds of people in the world. There's women and there's men.
Earlier, we heard from Clint Eastwood, Uma Thurman, and Dolly Parton, among others, having fun with the two kinds of people cliché in Hollywood movies. Popular culture, neurodiversity, and neurodiversity in popular culture will be running themes on The View from Vulcan. In each episode, I'll be looking to science, history, and philosophy to help answer one deeply profound, incredibly complex, and explosively controversial question in 20 minutes or less. Let's start the clock. Is gender a binary or a spectrum? That is, are humans born either male or female with differing social roles determined by God or by DNA? Or is gender a spectrum of identities related to but distinct from both biological sex and sexual orientation? Team Binary, your opening statement, please.
God created Adam and Eve and not Adam and Steve.
Women don't have penises. Men don't have vaginas. Non-binary is absolute nonsense.
Okay, thank you. Pastor Jim Veitch of Georgia and Kelly J. Keane of the UK, who describes herself as a women's rights activist, but not, repeat, not a feminist. Team Binary, your response.
Their group is what we call TERFs, or Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminists, so TERFs for short.
Racist, homophobic, transphobic, piece of spineless bastard! You.
Do you have snacks? Do you have water? And are you sitting comfortably? Because today we are breaking down J.K. Rowling's transphobia.
Taken totally out of context, that was Nancy Cato of the Reproductive Justice Coalition in San Francisco, followed by trans YouTuber Jamie Raines. Team Binary, do you have a rebuttal?
We all know what you were doing. The LGBTQIA community admitted they're coming for our children. How do you think these perverts are going to do that? They're going to bring their radical leftist ideology right into the school system.
We do not get to choose our gender. God does.
Those were the voices of grassroots activists at a 2023 school board meeting in Mesa, Arizona, where I used to live.
This transgender lie doesn't stop here. It stops with pedophilia.
They're out of control, they're evil, and we don't want them in our schools.
For full credits and source links from this episode, please visit the podcast website, at carriestuartlangle.us. The battle over transgender identity is being fought everywhere. In America and Europe, on cable news and social media, in the healthcare system, and in our schools. But if you've been around planet Earth for a while, you know the debate between Team Binary and Team Non-Binary has been going on a long time. A very, very long time.
In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth.
Jewish tradition says the book of Genesis was written by Moses himself, but modern scholars believe chapter 1, the creation story, is actually one of the latest bits added to an anthology of sacred writings assembled over centuries. A new preface to the latest edition of the Torah, if you will.
In the Garden of Eden, an innocent love spoiled by sin.
From a long-lost oral tradition, the Garden of Eden myth was written down in ancient Hebrew, Assyrian, and Aramaic, and later translated into classical Greek and Latin, echoing through the ages as the immortal battle cry of Team Binary.
God created Adam and Eve and not Adam and Steve.
Of course, when the first Torah scrolls were written some 2,500 years ago, Team Binary wasn't just an underdog in the battle for ideological supremacy. It was the laughingstock of the civilized world, which worshipped many gods. And when it comes to gender, well, you know the ancient Greeks were down with Team Non-Binary, right? In classical mythology, the god Hermaphroditus fell in love with a water nymph and prayed their bodies would merge into one. And then there's the philosopher Plato, who playfully speculated on the gender spectrum in a written dialogue known simply as the Symposium. Sure, it's a terrible title now, but trust me, back in the day, Plato's Symposium was a sexy, subversive sensation, the hottest track scratched on wax since the invention of the stylus. If you don't believe me, just ask John Cameron Mitchell, creator of the glam rock musical Hedwig and the Angry Inch, who reworks Plato in the power ballad The Origin of Love.
Now there was 3 sexes, then one that looked like 2 men glued up back to back. They called the children of the sun, and similar in shape and girth was the children of the earth. They looked like 2 girls rolled up in one.
Okay, I hear your objections. The Greeks and Romans may have been polytheistic, even polyamorous, but they were also patriarchal and misogynistic, and Plato's philosophy can be just as rigid and dualistic, or binary bound, as any religion.
Greeks and everybody else who wished they was Greek.
And you are 100% correct. On the other hand, nobody quotes Plato to denounce the radical trans agenda. Over the past 4 years, dozens of new state laws have been passed to limit trans kids' access to health care, their choice in bathrooms, and their participation in sports. This widespread backlash comes in part as a response to increasing visibility and acceptance of trans voices in Hollywood, including the very public transitions of Caitlyn Jenner, actor Elliot Page, and The Matrix directors Lana and Lily Wachowski. Ironically enough, however, attacks on the trans community also reflect a tacit surrender on the issue of gay rights by the conservative movement, following the Supreme Court's 2015 ruling on marriage equality. Now, we all know that what the Supreme Court giveth, the Supreme Court can taketh away. But public opinion on gay rights has shifted dramatically over the past 3 decades. In 1996, the year President Clinton signed the Defense of Marriage Act, only 27% of Americans supported the idea of same-sex marriage, according to the Gallup poll, with 68% opposed. Since then, those numbers have flip-flopped, with support for marriage equality hitting an all-time high of 71% in 2022. Basically, Americans decided it's okay to be gay, making transgender rights the new front line in the culture wars. Which really sucks if you're trans, especially because, as we've heard already, conservatives aren't the only ones who are skeptical and confused by the evolving language of gender identity.
I came out as transgender 34 years ago.
So you've always felt like you gravitated towards feminine things?
No, gravitated towards both. Part of me wants to be Steve McQueen in The Great Escape, and part of me wants to be Elizabeth Taylor.
That's non-binary comedian Eddie Izzard in 2019, telling mega podcaster Joe Rogan about coming out as transgender back in 1985.
If you're transvestite, you're actually a male tomboy. That's where the sexuality is.
Now, this may have sounded a little odd to longtime fans who could recite lines from Eddie's stand-up specials like Dressed to Kill from 1999.
It's not drag queen. No. Gay men have got that covered. Transvestite, 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 transvestite. Bloke wearing a lot of makeup. Executive transvestite.
Not long after the Joe Rogan interview, Eddie started using she/her pronouns in public, and in 2023 she became Susie Eddie Izzard, adding a new name but keeping the old one, so I'm not dead naming her by calling her Eddie. I think.
If I transition over, then I'll just be on the other side of this kind of fence that we give ourselves. And I've decided, okay, I'm gender fluid. I'm just going to have like a superhero, boy mode and girl mode.
The fact is, coming out as transgender wasn't an option in 1985. The term existed, but it wasn't widely used and didn't have an established definition. So Ed chose the closest identity label available, knowing full well it came with some baggage.
At school, I didn't tell kids I was a transvestite because I thought they might kill me with sticks, you know?
I'm not non-binary or gender non-conforming, just generally non-conforming. But I know what it means to feel like an outsider.
Why? I don't know. He said a word we didn't understand. And he won at Scrabble with it.
Like most people on the autism spectrum, I was bullied growing up. I thought it was because I was a fat, nerdy know-it-all who couldn't keep his mouth shut. But now, in middle age, I'm learning entirely new language to describe my life experiences and my identity. A lot like Eddie Izzard. So, while I don't want to be accused of cultural appropriation, getting diagnosed with autism as an adult kind of feels like coming out of the closet. And in fact, recent research suggests people with autism are up to 6 times more likely to identify as transgender. Maybe being on the autism spectrum makes it easier to see gender as a spectrum. But I'm supposed to be logical and objective. And so far, we've only heard from the loudest voices on Team Binary.
You say I am what I am, but you didn't know what that was.
I wasn't sure. The girls would do their things with their Barbies and things like that, and that wouldn't interest me.
David Raymer was raised a girl under the name Brenda. But when he was 14, he told his father he had always felt like a boy, as he recounted on the Oprah Winfrey Show in 2000.
Trucks and building forts and, getting to the odd fist fight and climbing trees. That's the kind of stuff that I liked, but it was unacceptable, so I'd never...
As a girl?
As a girl, I had no place to fit in.
So far, this sounds like a pretty standard trans narrative. The kind involving gender dysphoria and surgical transition, which the medical establishment used to label transsexual. But David Raymer was not trans. He was born with the usual male attachments, but after a botched medical circumcision, his parents made the agonizing decision to surgically transition him as a toddler and raise him as a girl.
Mothers are all over the world are all alike. There's guilt. It's darned if you do and darned if you don't.
Known in the medical literature as John Joan, David's case was already famous, as was his psychologist, John Money.
For years, this case was called a medical triumph, but in truth, the case was a failure.
Over the years, John Money had published multiple articles that dishonestly represented David's transition as a success, and therefore as proof that gender norms were cultural, not biological. All nurture, no nature. After his career-making case study fell apart, Money fell into disgrace, and the evolving science of gender identity had to be revised once again. Tragically, David Raymer took his own life in 2004, 5 years after going public with his story in Rolling Stone magazine. Today, his name is invoked as a martyr in YouTube videos like The Monster Behind Gender Theory and Dr. John Money and the Sinister Origins of the Trans Movement, and Why They Hope You Never Learn About John Money. Now, it's true that trans activists don't talk much about the John Joan case. But why would they? That was decades ago, and David Raymer wasn't transgender. John Money makes a convenient straw man for the other side, but his maximalist claims on gender were never fully accepted, and they certainly aren't reflected in current medical science or gender theory.
We have a whole range of differences
biological in nature, so I don't deny them. But I don't think they determine who we are in some sort of final way.
Now, if you believe public universities are brainwashing camps for wokeism, well, it's time to meet the Borg Queen.
One of the things we have to do to conform with existing gender norms is to rule out all those possibilities of being, feeling, doing, loving that don't line up.
Judith Butler is a feminist philosopher, speaking here in a video by Big Think.
When we talk about performative, we're talking about an act that makes something come into being or an act that has real consequences.
Best known for her books Gender Trouble and Undoing Gender, Judith Butler's theory of gender performativity is hugely influential in the academic world, and she makes regular appearances in mainstream media outlets like the New York Times and National Public Radio. Fox News and Truth Social, not so much.
In enacting our lives as a particular gender, we are actually realizing that gender anew. We are making something real happen. When gay and lesbian people started coming out, or when trans people started living openly, something changed in the world.
Now, you'd think a Jewish lesbian intellectual who uses she, her, and they, them pronouns and teaches philosophy at UC freaking Berkeley would make a great villain in conservative media. But no. They'd rather talk about John Money and trans radicals. At this point, maybe you're beginning to question my objectivity. If that's the case, all I can say is, what took you so long? Let's go back to the beginning.
In the beginning, God created the
No,
heavens
not that
and
one.
the earth. And the earth.
The other beginning. The cold open.
There are two kinds.
Two kinds.
There are two kinds of people in the world. Those who think you can divide humanity into opposing binary categories, and those who understand that reality is a bit more complicated. The problem with my opening statement, or the interesting thing about it really, is that it is both A, true, and B, meaningless. In my experience, at least, everybody categorizes other people into mutually exclusive binaries, and everybody also understands that reality is more complex than that. What they don't agree on is when to apply these seemingly incompatible principles.
Going back to 2017, 2019 saw the initial shift of J.K. Rowling voicing when called out, Rowling somewhat doubled down on her stance.
So you see, the binary is inescapable. The binary is inexorable. The binary is the alpha and the omega, the beginning and the end. It's an unstoppable force meeting an immovable object. You can deconstruct it, subvert it, and problematize it till the cows come home. But sooner or later, you will have to make a binary decision, in language and in life. Yes or no. Stay or go. Red or blue. Vote for the lesser of two evils? Or stay home and watch YouTube videos? Because, in the immortal words of Rush, if you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. Perfect timing. I'm ready to answer today's question. Is gender a binary or a spectrum? And the answer, of course, is both. The gender binary and the gender spectrum are two sides of a coin. They need each other and define each other. You can't have a spectrum unless you start with a binary, because a spectrum, by definition, has two endpoints, or extremes. Take sexual orientation as an example. When the word homosexual first appeared in scientific literature in 1868, it introduced not one, but two new categories: homosexuality and heterosexuality. And abracadabra, a new binary appears. 80 years later, sex researcher Alfred Kinsey proved conclusively that in reality, most people aren't exclusively gay or straight, but fall somewhere in the range between. He created the Kinsey scale from 0 to 6 to show these degrees of bisexuality. And presto changeo, a spectrum is born. This is a process that happens over and over again in language and culture. A dynamic competition between two opposing ideas or theories or paradigms. Philosophers call this process the dialectic. But you don't have to go to grad school to see dialectical thinking at work. Just watch your favorite movie or TV show for half an hour and listen closely for the binaries. I don't care what it is. Bridgerton, Fox News, The Bachelorette, whatever. Heck, throw a bachelorette party. Split up into teams and make it a drinking game. Team Binary takes a shot every time they detect a duality in the dialogue. A drink for every dilemma and dichotomy, every paradox and contradiction, every catch-22 and oxymoron. Team Non-Binary, on the other hand, drinks to gray areas and mixes of the two, to fine lines and third alternatives. They drink anytime somebody unpacks that or breaks it down for you. Call the game Dialectical Drinking. But be sure to stick to that 30-minute time limit, or you might find yourself sliding down that slippery slope from tipsy to trashed. When I say that gender is both a binary and a spectrum, I'm not just playing intellectual word games, and I'm not saying the debate is meaningless. On the contrary, the debate is how we make meaning in the first place. For me, ideas like the dialectic and gender performativity are empowering. They help me believe I have a voice in the future. All I have to do is make a binary decision. Choose a side, or choose the sidelines. Either way, we choose. Every day, in every conversation, with every word, every like, every share, we all choose. I choose to accept transgender people on their own terms, even if those terms are a moving target, because I want the same acceptance for myself and all the ways I don't conform to arbitrary social norms. I want the freedom to explore my identity and expand its limits. Wow, when I think about it that way, there's really no choice to be made at all.
There are two kinds of spurs, my friend. Those that come in by the door.
The binary is dead.
Those that come in by the window.
Long live the binary.
My whole life I've wanted to take a break from gender. I can never take a break from gender.
I'm Carrie Stewart Langle, and you've been listening to The View from Vulcan, a neurodivergent podcast.
The magnificent book of humanity is now a film. Its immortal characters, its passions, and its emotions.
If you enjoyed this deep dive into the gender debate, please visit the website to find out how you can spread the word and help me expand the project into a fully produced 10-part series.
Michael Parks and Ulla Bergrid, The Bible.
The View from Vulcan was written, narrated, and edited by Carrie Stewart Langle, with original music by Douglas Stewart Langle. Audio and video clips used in this episode are fair use exceptions to copyright protections. Find full credits, including YouTube links to source material, online at carriestewartlangle.us.